Hey guys, welcome back. In today's episode, I'm going to be test fitting the engine into the vehicle. But first, I need to get the old crossmember for the transmission out of the vehicle. Back in one of the first few episodes, I mentioned that the car had been bottomed out and the brackets were bent around the crossmember. I'm going to have to straighten those back out and get that crossmember out of here. And then we can get the engine and transmission stabbed in here. And once we have the engine mounts bolted to the center crossmember, then we can find out what position the rear crossmember for the transmission needs to be placed at. So here's what we're working with. These brackets here are bent backwards. All four of them are. We need to straighten those out first and then unbolt that crossmember and get it down. And then we'll test fit the transmission crossmember, make sure it fits. Once we know that's good, then we will lower the vehicle back down and try and get the engine transmission in place. Now I don't know what position I need to line these up with. I just loosely put some bolts in here so that I can test fit it in there and make sure it's going to actually fit into the frame rail and the mounting brackets for the crossmember. So it looks like that'll fit. The brackets are still a little bent, but I think when I go to tighten the bolts up, it'll situate itself. Since there's a little bit of slop and everything, if one's not lined up perfectly straight, I don't think it'll matter. I'm going to take this back out for now. We'll lower the car back down and then we'll start installing the engine. But I need to pull the original engine mounts or the frame purchase off of that front crossmember. And that looks like it's just 4 bolts on each one. But of course there is a nut inside the frame and some spooky spider webs. I just need a little more angle out of it to get it to fall down into the tunnel. And we're just barely clearing the core support right now. I want to try and scoot back a little bit. My oil pan is now dragging on the crossmember. I'm going to grab a jack and put it underneath the transmission. So as I lower it, the transmission won't get any lower and I can scoot the whole thing back to flat. So the mount over here appears to be in the right spot. I might have the other one on backwards. Not quite sure yet. I'm going to go up just a little bit, take a little bit of pressure off of the mounts so I can float the engine around. And since this side over here is lining up, I might drop a couple of bolts through the mount just to keep it lined up. And this isn't the right bolt, but it's a long bolt, so it'll give me some room to kind of float around. Yep, this side over here definitely does not line up. So I'm going to lift it up just a little bit more. Then I'm going to flip-flop the mount on the other side. Let's see if that makes it any better. Now they're very close to lining up. I just got to shift the engine around a little bit. And we're just about there. I'm just going to put another long bolt up here to hold it in place. Not quite sure about the mount fitment. I got one bolt on each side and the other 3 bolts are about a 1/4 inch off. It might just be something I need to loosen up the motor mount cross bolt and then get my transmission mount or cross member in there to kind of hold it, and then I can shift everything around until it lines up. These older cars weren't built to real close tolerances, so that could be the issue as well. It could be that the vehicle that they built and designed the mounts off of was a little bit different than this one. But I'm at least going to lift it up in the air and get that cross member in place. So if you can see that, that's the position I'm at now. I'm hoping that that'll be enough for me to get this sort of up in there. I was going to stick this bolt back through, but it doesn't fit. So I better grab some other bolts before I crawl underneath. I'm going to use the little bolts that came with the original oil pan. Don't worry, I'll put the right bolts in before I drive it. Now I'm just going to put a tranny jack underneath here and lift the transmission up so I can put the mount in and make sure that this is where it needs to be and get the right bolts through the mount. I didn't see any special instructions for this mount, so I'm guessing you use the original hardware. And since it looks like I can tighten these from below, I'm just going to leave them loose on the transmission until everything is where it needs to be. Looks like I need to go up just a little bit higher with the transmission. I've got the mount loose on the tranny still. I got the rest of the hardware loose. This bracket here is a little snug on that frame rail that's still a little bent. So I may have to drop that back down and straighten it out. The oil pan appears to clear just perfectly. There's about 3/4 of an inch of space. Pretty much all the way around it. I don't see any interference with steering linkages. Power steering pump looks okay. We are going to be replacing the steering gear with a power steering unit. And I will have to do some moving stuff around to get the rest of the bolts into the motor mount. I've got one on each side. The other 3 holes don't line up. I may even have to loosen the plates on the block, even though there wasn't a lot of slop in those holes. Just that little extra movement might get me where I need to be. Well, that's it for this episode. Nothing super exciting, but we did get the engine in the vehicle with a couple of bolts holding it in place. This will give us a better idea of what kind of exhaust we can run, how much clearance we have. We can test fit the truck manifolds that came with the engine. If those won't work, we can decide if we're going to run headers or run manifolds off of a LS based car. If you're new here and want to see the rest of the build, I'll put a playlist down below that includes all the other videos up to this point. If you want to see more of the build as it comes along, subscribe, click the bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.